So I think what we're going to do, originally when I think I kind of designed this panel, and my thought process behind this panel was to talk about the cycle of investing in mining. However, I think based upon the expertise that we both have and the questions you guys may have, we think that we're just going to open up and do a general QA. So if you do have questions about mining cycle, I'm happy to answer them. Also, this gentleman here has a lot of experience in another area of the market. I'll let him introduce himself. I think you guys would be interested maybe in some of what he has to say as well. Here you go.
Oh, sorry, do it this way. Okay. My name is Mathew Hunter. I'm retired now. I'd spent my early career, about 30 years, in precious metals. I started in the vault. I did gold and silver coins for Federal Coin and Currency and Mikado Metals before Mikado Metals became Bank of Nova Scotia. I traded, I'm Wall Street trained in arbitrage for foreign exchange precious metals, and I spent the last 20 years of my career in the federal government. And I spent essentially the last 10 years of my career as the Deputy Director of Surveillance for the CFTC. So I'm the guy that was responsible for detecting market manipulation and other infractions of CFTC and exchange rules. And that's really where my expertise is, in how to find bad actors, reasonably successful at that, and the limitations of the data streams that are available to government to do that kind of work. And so that's my background and my history. I can't talk about mine cycles. I'm the wrong person for that. I can talk about trading, how professionals view trading markets. I can talk about how, like, crypto markets function at some level, how derivative markets work, absolutely, how swaps work, how swaptions work, and how they interact with one another if you want to get into some weedy type of issues. There are a lot of things I'm not allowed to talk about because I was directly related to activities to detect and to prosecute. So I have to pass on a number of topics. And if we come upon one that I'll say I can't talk about it.
Awesome, thank you. So this is an awesome resource to have. I think you guys probably have a lot of questions. Expert in your field, have a lot of experience with the regulator. It's awesome.
Yeah, so just to top it off so you get an idea of really what the level was. I was hired by the CFTC. The chairman was Gary Gensler. And Gary Gensler is now the SEC chairman. I won't say that he selected me because the process is a little different, but he selected me. And he chose me in part because I had a reputation of being relentless in looking for bad actors when I was at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And he wanted to change the culture at CFTC from one of explaining what was happening in markets to one of finding bad actors from their data. All right.
Awesome. So I'll entertain your question in a second, just real quick. I've got 2 of these left and a few extras, so anybody asks a question, I'll give them away. What they are is a promotional item that a lot of the speakers got for attending Silver Symposium. It's 5 grams of silver on a card. So you guys ask questions, I'll give these away.
I'm in agreement. So when I was in government, I argued often, for instance, to have a real discussion about silver, to have an open discussion. There are things you can't share. The material comes from what's called Section 8 within the CFTC regulations, and that's confidential. So you can't talk about confidential things. But you can talk about process. You can talk about how you view data, so that when somebody says, as I said in one of the other presentations, Vanity Fair wrote an article that said that the S&P 500 was being manipulated regularly, and that government says it can see the activity, and then silence. And I said, we should say, yes, We can see the activity. And the article is wrong for these reasons, right? Not to say that the article was written in bad faith. It's to say, since you can see confidential information, I can see it. People will call me. I'll give you an example. I'm trading cattle. When I place my order, someone always seems to run in front of it. And I said, great, tell me the time and day that you traded, and I will look for you, because small players, I have account numbers, right? But any major market participant or reporting participant, I have their name. So if you tell me that you were trading at 9 o'clock on Thursday, I will find your order and I will look at the message data to see if somebody is intentionally running ahead of you. And I can look now at your history of orders to see if there is some sort of activity that conforms to your observation. Because I would say to my staff, the first thing you do is, can we see what the observer says they saw? All right? If we can do that, we can progress. If we don't see at all what the observer says they saw, this is a non-event for us and we just move on. So I am a believer in being very candid with people to the extent that they can, because as a public servant, we work for you. Hiding is bad. Trying to avoid publicity is bad. Take the bad stuff with it. Yesterday I got heckled right at the end. I said, why didn't you find this spoofing? And I have to laugh. And they said, one, I can't comment about what I did or did not find. And two, if you feel I didn't do a good job, all I can say is I did the best I could with what I had, all right? Which is what everybody else does, right? You just do the best you can and say it up front. Don't run away. So I'm in retirement. I'm happy to talk, as you can see.
Thank you for showing up at this event.
I was very pleased to. I wanted to come to try to inform, not allay fear, not castigate, not get into a confrontation about philosophy, but to say, this is what the job looks like. When people say things about derivatives, I want to be able to say, yeah, this is how they really work, right? This is what they do. Yeah, sure.
So one of the comments I'd like to make is I think there are challenges with some of the regulatory agencies and the resources they're given in order to monitor markets. And I think it's fairly widely accepted. You can correct me if I'm wrong from your standpoint, because you certainly were on the inside of one of the regulators. But when I talk to people, I think that they feel as though the CFTC in particular does not have all the teeth and the resources they need sometimes to manage those markets. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that given the trading activity that goes on, providing them additional resources would definitely be helpful. And I'm a former auditor, so I worked, in the audit industry for a long time. A lot of times as an auditor, you don't have the resources to go out and look at something, or you have limited resources to do something. And sometimes that can affect, your ability to detect something. So if a story comes out and there's a conviction or a fine around spoofing, I wrote about this in an article, and two directors from the CME group came to me, and they said, we don't believe what you say is true. And then 2 weeks later, the story came out that JP Morgan in particular had been fined almost $1 billion for treasury and precious metals manipulation. Now, my question back to them was, how come you didn't find that? And I never received an answer. They never addressed it. So maybe perhaps you can talk about that type of situation, because the perception is they're not addressing what we're seeing through the fines and through the data activity. Maybe there's another reason, why that's occurring, and you can shed some light on that for us.
I can. It's very interesting. So when I went to CFTC from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in October of 2011, at the time, I was recognized for bringing innovation to FERC to be able to find cases. My cases at FERC, which settled all the way to 2020. So I had been gone for 9 years when the last of the cases concluded. But the work that was done in 2009. It was all finished. Long process. resources. So I come to the CFTC, and Gary Gensler and the CFTC is fighting with Congress over budget. The budget that was proposed, because Dodd-Frank was going to be implemented, we're at the stage of implementing rules, and the swaps are coming into the surveillance domain. They had not been there before. So when I joined, I had, if memory serves correctly, so I had 69 staffers, which made me the largest group, almost the largest, I'm not a division, but larger than most divisions at the CFTC at the time. And the budget proposal was for me to have, over the next 2 years, up to, memory's right, about 130, and would grow all the way through 2017 to a significant number of people. When I left, I had 12 analysts. 12 analysts will get a job done, but it cannot find everything. And the group is torn with a lot of other responsibilities other than finding, let's say, benchmark manipulation or position limit violations or spoofing. We spent years building the programs to detect what I call simple spoofing, the most basic type of thing. One commodity, one future, layering, showing that an ad of bids against the small offer, trade of the small offer, cancellation of all the bids. That's an example. The budgets didn't grow for years. Then the group was, I would never have said that the 69 people that I had on day one could do the job. Some of them could do the job that I was asking them to do, which was be data-centric first. We're not doing what we did since 1990. We're going to change the function. We're going to be a data-centric organization looking for non-compliance, reporting violations, and the more serious things, which is benchmark manipulation through portfolio analysis. So when you say the staffing levels, are they adequate? The answer is absolutely not. When I was at FERC, to give you the idea of the perspective of it, I was asked, how many people would I need to catch everything? That you would, if you have the data, can you catch everything? And I said, yeah, it's going to be something like 2,000 people. And they only have two commodities, natural gas and electricity. He said, what do you mean 2,000 people? I said, you asked me to catch everything. What you really want to know is, how do I catch some? So you decide how many people I have, and I will tell you through resource allocation or that we will catch some, but we won't catch everything. The bad actor, I said this last night, I believe that there's market manipulation every day in the market being all markets. I don't know which one. So is it in the treasuries today at 10 o'clock? Is it at the gold market and the fix? Is it the closing of the S&P 500? Is the Russell that's being? I don't know which one that one man, one woman is attacking for purpose, or several people with a similar idea are attacking for purpose. But I know this, there are bad actors, all right? Not everybody is a bad actor. There are a lot of honest people, but there are bad actors. There are also bad actors everywhere else, all right? They're out there. So I can't tell you that answer. I can tell you that that's not the way we look at the world, all right? The way we look at the world is, what does the data tell us, all right? Spoofing is something that I say you have all the data for it, for a detection of a future spoof. If the futures are being used to get at the value of a cash market, you don't have all the data, because we don't get cash market data. If the futures were being used for a swap, to manipulate a swap, I might have the data, but I don't necessarily know that that swap is open and I should be looking at it. The idea that there is someone in a foreign nation who is manipulating more than someone who's domestic, We don't look at the data through the perspective of nation. And I generally tell the staff, you don't need the name of the person to say, let us look at bad actor bank, right? We don't care about that. You go look at the data, and if bad actor bank turns up, then we'll make a special call for more data to confirm whether or not we think a violation occurred. Remember that for CFTC surveillance doesn't recommend for prosecution. It recommend referral to enforcement for investigation. So the bar is pretty low. We get enough indication to say likely something happened here. You need to look at it, right, and to send it along. So nation doesn't mean anything. So do people in other nations do things? Sure. Do people in the United States do things? Absolutely.
One follow-up to that question I wanted to ask you was, given that approach, if you had the mission to try to identify specific types of trades, how difficult would that be for you? And the reason I ask that is because during some of these investigations by Department of Justice and other people that got involved, they were getting testimony for traders. They were looking at some layering. They were eventually able to pull out some specific examples that came out in the press. How challenging, or how can they do that? Do they have different tool sets, or is it just because they know they have a specific target? What is the difference between somebody doing that after the fact versus you in the moment trying to capture that type of stuff?
So this is a complicated question. So as I said, the one, I can't talk about what it is that we did. Sure. And I'm 2 years removed, and I don't know what the enforcement teams at CFTC were involved in. So the way we looked at the world for spoofing, once we built spoofing engines, detection engines, is to send that material to enforcement, right? They have to then reprioritize what it is that they're going to look at. So they have their own resource issues. So it's tough to say. Let's just use an example of saying, let's say I found spoofing in every commodity that we pulled in a month, right? That we see potential spoofing, because all you see is the detection engine identifies layering as an example. And it says, okay, we have these 200,000 instances, all right, by these individuals or firms. You send it on. Okay, all right, is that part of this investigation? I have absolutely no idea. I don't want to know, and I can't comment on it if I knew. Right, so it could be that the tool does exactly the same thing for both organizations, and the priorities were different for some reason. I have no reason to say, oh, I care about JP Morgan. I'm just looking at the data, right? If the data has a bank in it, we send it along and say, maybe there's an issue that CFTC attorneys care about or not, and maybe there's another agency that cares that they're in communication with. I have no idea. So the resource issue, things fall away when people say, I don't have time for this. I was talking with a friend of mine at the SEC about something that I believe, and I won't go into it, that I believe is manipulated, that is of significant interest to the SEC, that I never looked at and been thinking about for about 4 or 5 years. And I didn't look at it because we didn't have any resources to apply. So I said, I can't build the detection of something that I think is significant because I just don't have the staff. All right. And the person that I could assign was, this deep in other things. He said, you have to let it go. I can't do it. So I told him what my idea was. I don't know that they'll pursue it.
Yeah, depends upon their staffing and budget.
Also, and whether he's thinking that my scenario is reasonable.
True.
Right.
There's a lot of perception involved in that as well. You
Yes.
might want to make a comment on that?
Sure.
So one of the things that we did as an audit team is you set your audit goals based upon a lot of times what management perceived as being potential threats to the business, plus feedback you got from line level management and previous results. But on an audit team, I work for a big company like Verizon or even for Ernst & Young doing work for other clients. It's very difficult after the fact to have picked all the right places that you want to look at and have all the right resources to do the work and then catch all of the potential scenarios. And one of the things that gets very difficult, especially, is when you have two parties acting, because it's easier to put in controls against a single party. Against collusion's much more difficult, easy to circumvent those controls. So there always are going to be areas, I think, in which you can have controls in place, but those controls, if you look at Sarbanes-Oxley, for example, we always said that didn't cover collusion to manipulate financial statements. There are weaknesses in the resources and the time and the effort it takes. And often, that was always a frustration point with us as auditors is you do the best you can, you don't always have the resources you try to do. But there's just stuff you're never going to know. There's always stuff going on you're never going to find, right? And that's kind of, I could see that with some of the regulatory agencies. You're going back in a market that has, potentially millions of transactions, especially like a derivative market where you look at the open interest on COMEX, for example, and it could be 400,000, in a day. And that's a lot of work. Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of...
So I spoke about this before, all right, during this conference. So if you've heard it before, I'm sorry. So there's a lot of data. There isn't so much data that you can't look at it. Everything is looked at through, you build a computer program. There's too much data to do it by hand, right? We're not going to go and try to understand trading. So most people don't understand that the market isn't futures, it's not options, it's futures and options, all right, is one leg. Other derivatives, swaps and swaptions are another leg. And the third leg, and probably the most important, though it is not the most heavily traded, is the physical markets. So you got physical and physical contracts, agreements, transfer and transportation, all right, for all commodities. So you have to have all three of them. You have to have the data of all three to understand. So if you look at futures only and somebody says, well, I'm hedging. Hedging what? Hedging swaps and swaptions, hedging futures options, hedging physical transactions. And then the question becomes, is it true? The benchmark manipulation, I think, is the most interesting of all the things that can be done by the CFTC in commodities. And it is also the most difficult thing to do because you have to recapitulate the trading book of the trader to understand it as they understand it, all right, and then prove that they were trading for effect to change the value of what we call the benefiting position, which can be physical or it can be derivative. So you have to understand the portfolio. I say this first rule of trading for every trading organization is know thy position. The one thing that a trader can get fired for immediately is not knowing his position. They don't get fired if you don't know where the price is. Price volatility, right? You lost it for a moment, who cares, right? The question is, what's your exposure to that missing price, not what is the missing price? So if I can understand, and the analyst can understand the portfolio as well as the trader can understand the portfolio, then we can understand whether they had an incentive to manipulate or not. And then it is easy to create the simple spreadsheet of all the open positions and demonstrate if the value of the portfolio will change by moving the benchmark price. So if you double the price, all right, do you make more money or do you lose? So when someone says, the market is only giving me what the market will give. I don't know what your complaint is. He said, so you're saying you're aligned with the market, that a seller wants to sell high and that a buyer wants to buy low, right? That's aligned. Everyone knows that is economically. But if I change the value of the commodity, right, the benchmark, so let's say it's settled at 100, we make it 200. If you say you're a seller, and I change the price to 200, you should make more money. If you lose money, it says the portfolio is aligned differently. So if I double the price, all right, and you're a buyer, you're going to make a staggering amount more money. which says if you're in the market buying, something is wrong to say I'm incented to pay an infinite price. All right? You're not aligned with the market. You're not trying to buy low, you're trying to buy high. And that says if you're buying when you benefit from higher prices, something is wrong with the portfolio and you're likely manipulating. And that's what benchmark manipulation analysts are trying to detect. Are you in a market moving the price to benefit a benefiting position? That benefiting position can be a derivative, it can be the settling of or establishment of a derivative, it can also be a physical product. There are lots of commodities that have something called physical at index. And so the physical is being set by different trades in other physical instruments. And that's what we do.
I got a question for you specifically on spoofing. By the way, thank you for all the information you're providing. We don't get this a lot to someone of your experience. Yeah.
So this is not the first time that I've been in the public. I don't want to give a secret, which is about the specific trade secret of a firm or the position of a firm from years ago. I'm nearly 2 years removed. I'm not going to talk about anything that's relevant or related to those types of things anymore. I'm trying not to say anything at all.
I do have a question about the mechanics of the market, not specific to any company or investigation, but it's something I think that's maybe not well understood. So when you're doing, let's say you do a futures trade, you have a buyer and a seller, or a long and a short, if you will. One of the allegations in a spoofing type scenario is that someone's putting in a market order and then they remove it. And the implication being that as the market makers or the market participants are all looking at the market, if they see a bunch of bids going a different direction, that may, in their mind, influence their view of that market, even though those trades have not occurred. So in terms of spoofing in general, does spoofing in general actually help create a market or move a market in and of itself? And is the market determined solely by the amount of long and short positions?
I can talk about all that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, look, spoofing. So spoofing clearly is a crime, all right? It is a single line in the rules and regulations. It's disruptive trading, and obviously if you disrupt trading, you are interfering with a well-functioning market. That's the idea. So the behavior is, that classic behavior is to submit orders that you do not intend to fill, to influence the decision of the market, somebody else, to trade on the other side of your orders on another order that you've placed for a volume. Generally, it's a small volume against a large volume, and then cancel all the orders that you don't intend to trade. So clearly, that is, if you think of it in terms of the SEC, you said that it's injecting false information into the market, essentially saying, if you could talk to the market, you all should buy with me because the market is worth so much more and Charlie's going to buy behind us. So lift this offer. And when you lift the offer, all the bids dry up and you're left with having traded not your economic best interest because you were misinformed deliberately. That's what spoofing is. But spoofing, for me, is a transitory thing. The market immediately reverts to where it was, and someone is defrauded because the market may never have traded at that price again, even if it was at the top of the order book, right? That the vibration may never have traded at that level again and then moved away. So you say that I sold one on the spoof and then the market moved lower, says the market wanted to move lower. Someone was defrauded because they traded against their best interest. We're talking about a very slim price difference, right? A tick. If someone were to say a tick was misrepresented in all the trading today in silver, one tick, would anybody care? And it was, no, right? The person who got defrauded on the one tick, they might care, but nobody else does, right? If you do it 100 times a day, does everybody care? You do it 1,000 times in a day. If 100 people do it 1,000 times a day, because more than one person may be trying to spoof at any given time, it's saying that the market itself the market integrity is threatened, right? It's being abused. And why should we have confidence in it if spoofing is taking place? So it should be prevented. And there's a lot of emphasis on it now. And I think the DOJ case, if I'm not mistaken, is a data case. All right. There's no smoking gun. There's no tape recording. There's no speaking document that says I was placing orders in the market that I intended not to trade. So it's important from that perspective. For 20 years, I've been saying the data is a speaking document. You just have to learn how to read it. As opposed to, I need this very specific, I was manipulating the grain market, as an example, the wheat market or the gold market or the silver market. I was manipulating, you have a written document someplace in English, as opposed to, my analogy is, if you have a murder confession in Turkish and you don't read Turkish, do you have a confession? All right? And people will say, no, but you can get a translator. I can read the data. If I can read Turkish, it's a confession.
Another question for you. This is a hypothetical. Please don't refer to any previous investigations you were or were not involved in. Some of what has come out in the press regarding some of the trading desks specific to the precious metals manipulation cases has been around people in trading desks saying, we were told to do this, it's institutionalized. As a junior, they may or may not understand the significance of this, but there appeared to be some sort of culture around doing certain things. As a regulator, do those types of comments, would they ever influence your view of the market at all, and therefore maybe cause you to say, hey, this may be something worth investigating? And the reason I ask is because, for example, when I was in cybersecurity and we had the big Target breach, and in the Target breach, point-of-sale systems were compromised. I was at Verizon at the time. I did an investigation over point-of-sale systems, and we found some weaknesses just because management wanted us to. It was more assurance of, are we vulnerable to this? Would the regulatory agency ever take that approach and look at the outside environment and say some information's coming in from the outside environment? Do you take that as an input into your regulatory approach for the markets?
Okay, so it's a nuanced question. This is the question of culture. Do you have a culture of compliance, or do you have a culture of non-compliance? When someone says, I was taught to commit bank robbery, I commit crime because everybody around me commits crime, is it now okay? All right, the answer is no. You're not allowed to be a criminal. You have to behave within the rules. It is a much more serious issue for, I'm going to say, for the settlement process, right? The undertaking process. It's everywhere. I can't tell you the number of times that someone says, well, I was taught to do that, right? You go, my favorite one is, how else do you make money? So if the issue is the only way you can make money is by committing a crime, something is significantly wrong. I have said throughout my entire career, there are lots of ways to make money. You don't have to violate the law. All right? You don't have to speed, through the school zone, at 90 miles an hour. You don't have to do these things. The thing about trading, and it's the beauty as well as its curse, is it's filled with clever people, but you're supposed to follow the rules. There were complaints against Enron that Enron read the rules, right, and then abused the rules. Well, some things they did were illegal, but there were things that they did that were not illegal, but were within the rules. If you're trading within the rules, okay, change the rule if you don't like it anymore. But you can't say you committed a crime by following the rules, right? So in a culture that encourages bad things, I'll give a story, right? I won't say which firm. a long time ago, a compliance officer, a friend of mine, calls me and said, I have a problem. I said, and what's the problem? He said, that they brought the co-ed interns into the office today, and the head trader gave several of the women sloppy kisses. And it was just a ha-ha, right? And I said, that is evidence of a non-compliant culture. If you violate the small thing, you will violate the big thing. You will find a reason all along the way to say, this is okay. You have to follow all of the rules. And I will tell you in government, talking to my attorneys, to say, you are going past the rule of law. You are not able to do this. You might have a good heart in saying we need to do this, but you can't. You got to stay with the rules. If we are going to hold others to the rules, then we must hold ourselves to the rules. So ethics, integrity matter. And I swear, there's so many trading opportunities to make money. You don't need to cheat. There's no reason. You may not make as much money, but there's no reason to cheat. If you cheat and you have a culture of cheating, that is a significant problem. And to answer your question, the enforcement groups care about that. There is no data that comes in to a regulatory agency that contains the letters that say, oh, we're teaching people how to manipulate an index. That kind of documentation doesn't come in.
Yeah, of course, they're not going to document it. I think we'll have time maybe for one question before Independence Money comes in for their tax. So,
it's a great question. So it's a nuanced answer, and I'm sure it's unsatisfactory. My own view is the punishments are never near enough. All right, I have been an advocate for. My belief is that if you want a firm to change its behavior, the punishment has to impact the shareholders or the owner significantly. It has to be harsh. Big punishments may be a big dollar value, but it may not register as something that affects the board and the C-suite. All right. So I'm a big believer in that. There are different issues and different arguments about criminal punishment. DOJ is criminal, CFTC for the most part is civil. There are some constraints there, and I'm not happy with them. And I believe, again, that more cases should go to trial and get really maximum fines. Things don't go to trial, they go to settlement for all sorts of reasons, including resources, right? That trials are expensive for government institutions. So I won't say there's a formula, but you look at it, and I think CFTC's is $160,000 per infraction. You got to be using that type of number in your calculation. 160,000, how many infractions were there? What happens if is one manipulation $160,000? Is one spoof $160,000? Is one attempted spoof $160,000? How do you add them all up to get to a number? I think that those types of constraints are wrong, and that the objective of government should be to dissuade illegal conduct and to incentivize compliance and the expense of building internal systems to detect it internally. And I also believe that the law should be that it's mandatory to report to government the detection of a potential violation. That's true at the FCA, all right? In England, if you have a potential violation, you're obliged to report it to the government. We encourage voluntary reporting, right, as a mitigant to the fine. You said, I caught myself, I'm reporting myself. But you don't have to report. If you don't report, you don't get caught. What does that mean? So I'm in agreement that my personal view is to dissuade illegal conduct. The punishment has to be harsh, particularly since it's only, for the most part, it's only money. got to change the attitude of the shareholder and the board, right?
We're going to go ahead and wrap it up because I think we have another group coming in.